Welcome to System Safety. My name is Teresa Stack and I am the instructor for this course. This course will rely quite heavily on the second edition of Risk Reduction Methods for Occupational Safety and Health, written by Dr. Roger Jensen. And his cover, although it's somewhat simplistic, really brings together the whole idea of system safety. And then our goal is to reduce risk, and we do this through using system safety methods, techniques, and strategies, as well as strong implementation and review of our occupational safety and health programs, and identifying our risks or our hazards that are out there. So we reduce our risks by identifying our hazards and putting controls in place. So because this is a relatively short session in the summertime, we're going to focus mainly on the first three parts of the text: background analysis methods and programmatic methods for managing risk. And I really think you'll enjoy the book. It's well written, and each part is like a sandwich. And I urge you not to go keto on this particular book, and that is to read the introduction and the summary as well, because it really helps to prepare you for the really juicy stuff that's in the middle of the text. And the summary at the end, a lot of the review questions come from the summary at the end. And so you've probably already taken the opportunity to take a look at the syllabus, but here it is summarized again here. And you can see that we'll cover about a chapter or two every week. You will have one exam in this course, and then your second exam isn't really an exam, it's a final project where it brings everything together. And I always believe that projects are far better than any kind of exam. This course is very practical, and you'll be using the techniques that we learn in class during your homework assignments. And so I hope you find them fun and engaging instead of rote memorization. So how did we get to where we are today? Now, I always believe that safety and health regulations were written in blood. Somebody had to die, or a number of people had to die or be injured before a rule or regulation was being put into place. And that's definitely true when it comes to our governmental rules. But we have different contributions that come from our universities, science and engineering, as well as our public health sector. And system safety is a way that this all gets wrapped together, because it takes a look at not only the engineering requirements and techniques, but also programmatic and management requirements and techniques. And NASA was a leading edge in developing system safety analysis tools and using it in the creation of their space exploration program, as well as, of course, the military. And I believe one of the first system safety documents was created by the military, and it is one of the MIL standards. And so it's important to learn system safety if you're an occupational safety and health professional, because it aids in the prevention of injuries, illnesses, property damage, and it protects the environment. It's also a very systematic approach and takes our biases out of the factoring in when we're looking at putting different plans in place or determining what the real risk is. And I believe, and Roger Jensen believes this as well, is it's very portable. Portable meaning that when you change careers, system safety can go right along with you. Currently, I am working for the Department of Transportation, and I do a lot of risk management, reducing their injury and illness claims, as well as citizen claims. And we use different risk management techniques that I was able to adapt from my time at Montana Tech and working with the Department of the Navy. A little bit different spin on safety and health, but still pretty much the premise is the same. And so it's not really important what I do, what's important is what you do. And system safety is an application of science, engineering, and management principles, criteria, and technique to optimize safety within the operational constraints of the system. And this is throughout the entire life cycle. And so here we're not going to talk about some of those other things in system safety, such as probability and manpower and training requirements, and we're going to focus on the safety elements itself. Safety is definitely an emerging field, and that's because technology changes so quickly that we introduce new risks, as well as we introduce new risk management techniques, as well as solutions that could be put into place. Certainly 15 years ago when I was in the field, I was taking pictures that were being downloaded onto a video camera that I had to translate, and 5 years before that, so that's 20 years ago, my pictures were being put on a floppy disk that then got put into my computer, and now I'm able to use an iPad and take the pictures and really document what I see in real time. And so system safety helps us make informed decisions that we can then communicate to other levels of management in the same language. And so as we're watching this little description, and I really do love the Chemical Safety Board for its thoroughness and the different techniques it uses, let's take a look at what potentially could have been different as far as system safety goes. And if you could identify the system safety elements.
The chemical plant is located in Crosby, Texas, about 25 miles northeast of Houston. The facility manufactures and distributes organic peroxides used to produce consumer products such as solid surface countertops and polystyrene cups and plates. Organic peroxides are reactive chemicals, and some of those stored at the Arkema plant must be kept at temperatures below 20 degrees Fahrenheit to prevent them from decomposing and catching fire. These low-temperature organic peroxides are stored in temperature-controlled warehouses and are shipped in refrigerated trailers. At 10 p.m. on Friday, August 25, 2017, Hurricane Harvey made landfall near Corpus Christi, Texas, as a Category 3 storm. Soon, rain began to fall at the Arkema facility. The following day, Saturday, August 26th, the plant was fully shut down, and a small number of workers were on site to implement the facility's hurricane preparedness plan. Hurricane Harvey remained in the area into the next day, dumping historic amounts of rain. Water levels rose at the facility, threatening electrical equipment. By Sunday, August 27th, the workers shut off power to a number of buildings, including some of the low-temperature warehouses and their generators, as they were inundated with floodwater. Without power, those warehouses were at risk of not staying cool enough to prevent decomposition of the organic peroxides. To prevent this, operators began moving the chemicals into other low-temperature warehouses that still had power. They also moved some of the organic peroxides onto refrigerated trailers. When the trailers were full, the operators moved them to a yard on the north side of the plant, where water levels were lowest. By Sunday night, only the largest low-temperature warehouse had power and was the only one still storing organic peroxides. Around 2 a.m. on Monday morning, August 28th, the facility's transformers flooded, leaving the entire plant without power. Backup generators kicked on and provided power to the remaining low-temperature warehouse. But workers believed those generators would soon flood as well, and decided to move all of the organic peroxides out of the warehouse and onto refrigerated trailers. In the meantime, heavy rain from Hurricane Harvey continued, and water levels rose further. During the day on Monday, vehicles used to relocate the refrigerated trailers flooded and failed, leaving 3 trailers near the warehouses. But workers continued to move the organic peroxides from the warehouse onto the 3 refrigerated trailers. By Monday night, the plant's forklifts also stopped working, and workers began moving individual 1-gallon organic peroxide containers by hand onto the last trailer. After all of the organic peroxides were moved from the warehouses onto the refrigerated trailers, management decided that the remaining workers would need to evacuate the following day. Eventually, the 3 refrigerated trailers near the warehouses began to fail as the floodwaters rose. With refrigeration on those trailers lost, there was nothing to stop the chemicals inside from heating up and catching fire. On Tuesday, August 29th, the Crosby Fire Department evacuated the workers remaining at the Arkema plant. Arkema management informed emergency responders that the organic peroxides would begin to decompose and catch fire sometime in the near future. A decision was made to evacuate everyone in a 1.5-mile radius of the plant and wait for the trailers to burn. Finally, on Thursday, August 31st, the organic peroxides inside one of the trailers decomposed and combusted, causing the vehicle to burn. By the next day, 2 more trailers were in flames. By Sunday, September 3rd, the 6 remaining trailers had not yet caught on fire as expected. Emergency responders initiated a controlled burn of the organic peroxide. Afterwards, the evacuation order was lifted, and neighbors were allowed back into their homes. Several emergency responders reported injuries, but luckily, no one was killed.
So when we take a look at this and we think through it, we could see that different controls
At a city's sewer construction site, a quicksand condition developed, pulling...
Sorry about that. We could see that different controls were put into place. However, the controls weren't sufficient enough for the amount of floodwater that they had received. And so if this organization had done a good job hazard analysis, which they had actually done, and they put all these different controls in place, then that's what enabled them to kind of keep stepping up their game every time the water didn't recede over time. Some things that did come out of the findings, however, so one of the recommendations from the Chemical Safety Board was to bring together those different entities that we saw on the previous slide. Government entities, corporations, emergency response organizations, as well as educational institutions, to take a closer look at the emergency response plans and different ways in which they can be changed so that you can mitigate those emergency response plans. One thing that stood out for me when I took a look at this particular scenario was the individuals who are carrying organic peroxides that could catch on fire in relatively outside environmental temperatures and were getting wet, and they were carrying them through water, all the way up to their waist. And something like that would have been definitely dangerous, or was really dangerous, and really stood out to me is why wasn't there a control in place so that people didn't need to do that and put themselves at risk. And so they're looking at different ways in which maybe even if you think about it, the environment around there could be changed to create a higher ground or move these to higher ground or different kinds of barriers so flood waters wouldn't rise inside of the facilities. And that's really the only way sometimes we get to see something is through environmental destruction or death. And then we take a look at it and realize that our controls just weren't quite good enough to put into place. And so they were looking for actions to prepare for extreme weather as well as resiliency when we're protecting the infrastructure, to have different regular processes for when there is high water conditions or dangerous weather, as well as being able to put sufficient layers in place. And this layering is definitely something that we do in system safety. Is it's not just one stopgap that's put into place, but multiple stopgaps so that we can ensure that this type of incident doesn't happen again. And really updating is something that any of us who have gone through COVID and we pulled out our pandemic plans, we probably saw them written in 2005 and 2008. We had our pandemic in 2020 and the plans just didn't make sense anymore. So how often do we go in there and update, for example, our floodplain plans, as well as making sure that the protocols really make sense now? And do our individuals, are they actually refreshed on the things they need to be refreshed? Or is it something that just gets stale over time because we're going through a checklist and we're really not evaluating what the new risks are associated with the changing weather patterns, maybe our changing processes, the change in our operational environment. For example, when I was at Boeing, right before COVID was the crash of the two 737s, and our workforce was decreased significantly, and then during COVID it was decreased even more. And therefore, our emergency plans just wouldn't make sense anymore because we didn't have the boots on the ground that we had once had. You know, how often do we actually change those? It's something to kind of think about. This is the overview. So, a hazard is a source with the potential for causing consequences. And not the horse, but the source has specific definitions associated with it. And that's the word source, the potential for causing, and it is those harmful consequences. And so we're going to want to be able to define each one of these by the time we get through at least the first 2 chapters on our book. So something else that Dr. Jensen does really well is that he updated these cognizant domains. And so you've probably seen in different learning outcomes or your syllabi that you should be able to understand, have basic knowledge, comprehend, apply it, do analysis, synthesize, and evaluate. And if we look at the way that it's been updated, and this is the way the course is designed, is that you should be able to remember and understand so you can apply. So if you remember the definition of a hazard and you fully understand that, then you should be able to apply the analysis tools. And after you apply those tools, you'd be able to analyze the results, create a plan to reduce the hazards, and then evaluate your plan. And it's a different way of looking at it where you really need the first 3 building blocks and then the next 3 building blocks come together in succession. Because once you can apply what you learned, you should be able to evaluate and analyze. And the difference between those 2 terms, it depends on really who's doing the defining, but usually it's a group of assessments that lead to an evaluation. So you assess things with maybe 3 different methods, and that's how you get your evaluation. So in our introduction, we do think about this as low as reasonably practical, meaning that we can't reduce all risk in the workplace. We try as hard as we can to bring it down to a negligible level, but that's somewhere in between what's intolerable and what is absolutely not there. So in the world of occupational safety and health, and certainly in system safety, we look at this middle zone as low as reasonably practical. And that reasonably practical not only depends on an example of what techniques we're using, but how much risk is allowed inside of our facility. So environmentally, we tolerate much less risk, much less parts per million or parts per billion in our drinking water than we do in parts per million in our breathing air in our occupational environments, because we just tolerate more risk there. And that's because in going into our environment, our occupational setting, we assume a certain amount of risk, right? So what's the lowest amount that's reasonably practical and reasonably achievable? And so you've definitely seen this before, the way that we're able to put controls in place. We eliminate the hazards, then we substitute it for something less hazardous. Then we put our engineering controls in place, followed by our administrative controls with our practices and procedures. And at the bottom is our personal protective equipment, because it really does nothing to reduce the risk. And so if we kind of take a look at this on the flip side, there's certain strategies that we're able to put into place. And our strategies help us reduce the risk, reduce the hazards in the workplace. And so we'll spend some time looking at these strategies and going through them, because they're part of the system safety process. And this is just an overview of the way the book is set up and different terms and techniques that it uses, which we'll go into more detail when we take a look at that chapter. So the book does focus on a variety of tools, although I'll be focusing on the tools in which we use the most in occupational safety and health. There's different governmental organizations which have brought us to the current state of occupational safety and health. And they get outdated over time and have to be refreshed. And remember that system safety, when we think about this system and safety, it's these three things together: scientific engineering and management principles to optimize safety within the constraints that are available to us. And so this concludes the summary of the book, and I hope you have a wonderful day.